I really want to thank everyone for joining us in our first Startup Societies Café. This is a new initiative by the Startup Societies Foundation, where what we want is to start conversations between those people who have already made their startup societies and those who want to or are in the process. We think that this intergenerational experience, cross-cultural experience, it's really important, especially for those who want to know how to do things and, most importantly, how not to do things. And that's why we decided that the topic of the cafe was, please share with us 3 lessons, 3 wins, 3 fuck-ups or challenges. And we decided to begin with the OG of the movement. Here we have Sealand, represented by Prince James and Prince Liam from the Principality. So thank you so much, Liam and James, for being so late. It must be like 10 p.m. Sealand time, something like that.
Yeah, it's 10:30 now.
Okay,
Thank you for having us.
thank you for being here. So, Julian, why don't you begin with some brief technical um, guidance?
Yes, of course. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you is that please we're gonna all the questions that you have, we're gonna make it at the end of the principal questions that we're going to make. So please, I'm gonna ask you kindly to keep your mic mute during the conversation. And once we're unable, I'm gonna ask you to raise your hands, please, in order to make the questions in an organized way. Also, as Natalie already mentioned, we're gonna make the format of the question that we're gonna be making is gonna be first we're gonna talk about the fuck ups and the challenges. After we're gonna talk about the wins, and for last we're gonna talk about all the lessons that Sealand had learned along the way.
And people will have the opportunity to just talk directly to Prince James and Prince Liam. So why don't we begin with a brief history of Sealand? What is Sealand?
Do you want to start, James, or shall I?
So I can start back in the 60s. My grandfather and father were in pirate radio in the UK. They were basically broadcasting from ships and, well, from fortresses off the coast of the UK, broadcasting pop music into the UK against the will of the government, against the regulations. And over a period of time, my grandfather was pushed further and further offshore. And he eventually ended up on Sealand, where he didn't actually broadcast from, but decided to launch his own country. And then, Liam, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think he was very upset. That's probably the main reason he did it. You know, he was a decorated war hero, and the country that he'd fought for had crushed his freedoms and destroyed free enterprise in his eyes. So he found Sealand that was in international waters and declared it a country. He then raised the flag, you know, wrote the constitution, developed all the other trappings of state, you know, issued passports, all those kind of things. The history has been long, nearly 60 years now. There have been many eventful times, the coup d'etat, the counter coup, Haven Co. We had a fire today. We have football teams, you know, soccer, American football style team, as well as others competing in things ranging from athletics to curling and all manner of things, which is pretty awesome and fun. We offer Lord and Lady titles now to basically fund Sealand. You know, it's been financially independent for a good 10 years now, which is a big change from the 50 odd years of toil and struggle from my family. Yeah, and we also just over a year ago launched an e-citizenship program, and we have e-citizens in, James and I are actually talking about it today, I think 124 countries.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean it's quite fascinating to see the reach of Sealand and the message, to be honest. And today we've been looking towards the future, and that's how we got involved with Joe and Natalie and the Startup Societies Foundation to really build into the future with Sealand.
Nice. So in these 60 years of history, lots of things have happened, like you said. What do you think has been the biggest challenge that Sealand has faced when trying to strive for sovereignty, to be recognized as a sovereign?
I think the biggest challenge has been, it, well, there are many. There are many, especially given Sealand's location. You know, we're not a parcel of undisputed land in a comfortable place. We're 7 miles offshore in the North Sea. And especially in the early days, anything and everything needed to be transported by boat. And by boat, I mean old boats that we had that were constantly breaking down while you're trying to resupply Sealand. Just everything you can imagine was an uphill challenge. You know, electricity was run by generator for possibly half hour a day. It's, you know, through the years, it's got easier and easier. And today, obviously, the price and the scale of all the things that we use has come right down. You know, 99% of our energy is now wind and solar. We have safe and nice boats to take us to and from Sealand. And we, you know, through the Noble Title Initiative, we actually have funds to regenerate the fortress. But yeah, I mean, the struggles have been many and they do continue to be many. I mean, the diplomatic pressures and the UK government, you know, hatching all sorts of plans to uproot us and get rid of us. It's been a difficult 60 years.
And in that time, what do you think has been the biggest mistake you've made in this fight?
I think it would be hard to overlook the coup d'etat. I think that's probably, I know it's quite specific to Sealand, but I mean, this is definitely something you have to think about. You know, my grandfather was talking to a group of investors who wanted to develop Sealand into a leisure island with a casino, hotel, all those kind of things, and they decided they were going to write him out of it because, I mean, you have to defend yourself. You know, if you're out of the system, then you're completely responsible for your own safety. And so, yeah, this guy hired a bunch of mercenaries, captured my father, overthrew the Sealand government, and released my father. And then within a few days, they launched a dawn helicopter raid on Sealand, broke the coup, reclaimed Sealand, and yeah, took hostages, which led to one of the biggest wins. We're not on wins yet, but one of the biggest wins was that the German government sent a diplomat directly to Sealand to negotiate for his release. So through adversity comes opportunity.
Indeed, indeed, totally agree. And so some of these things were predictable. I mean, when you talk to other powers who have more and different types of power in geopolitical terms, then some things can be predicted, right? They're not going to want things.
Mhm.
But what would you say is perhaps the most unexpected crisis or challenge that you have had to face that is not related to traditional hierarchical governments who are there in the territory trying to set boundaries or not?
Yeah, so of course those challenges are huge, but not insurmountable, I think, long term. I suppose you might say that we had a huge fire in 2006, and that really gutted Sealand. Like everything that we'd built, our home and all the infrastructure, everything was destroyed, pretty much everything. And you know, we had a decision to make. Do we start again or do we leave the dream? I don't think it was ever a question. So we got back to work, you know, it was kind of although it was a really hard time, it proved to ourselves that we still have that same grit, determination to be independent and do this for ourselves and make sure that we continue.
Yeah.
Especially for our generation, you know, we'd missed a lot of the original sort of sieges and everything that you were talking about earlier. But actually, for us, this was a sort of a very turning point. You know, it was sort of everyone looking at us and what are you going to do next? And yeah, we took on the challenge like our family have up until now.
Maybe we could linger a little bit on the sieges because that's something that's sort of out of the scope of most people's experience, having to fight off pirates, militaries, you know, that sort of thing. You know, could you t spend a little time talking about the difficulties of having to deal with that on the high seas?
I'm trying to take that down.
Yeah, I mean, it would always come from both angles. So we had Sort of rival factions within the pirate radio that were continually trying to invade the fortress. My father, being 14 at the time, fought them off with homemade Molotov cocktails and different other devices to deter people from coming. But we also had the government like laying siege and not allowing the fort to be resupplied. They made it illegal actually for people to resupply so that people couldn't leave the UK with stores, sorry, and resupply us. So my father was out there. It made the sort of headlines in the UK newspapers about the fact that these starving children were not allowed their stores. My grandfather was out there on a boat shouting. But yeah, it's been a struggle. I mean, Liam, can you?
Yeah, I just like you say, the attacks have been from all angles. Like James said, there be that rivals, the government, um, and yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you truly have to adapt to any situation that comes, in every different aspect, political, physical, violence, all of those kind of things. And thankfully, we've risen to the occasion each time, but you have to be aware that these things are only ever around the corner and you have to be prepared for them.
I don't want to divert too much from the questions that we have laid out, but one question that comes to my mind is, well, for one, I don't think that most special jurisdictions are going to come across the same challenges that y'all did. Very few are attempting sovereignty, on the high seas. Most are, working with existing legal frameworks as a special economic zone or a different project. But regardless, there are enormous challenges. It's difficult to start up any company, let alone a new jurisdiction. What type of mentality or personality does one need to have to deal with those types of challenges? How do they get through the day dealing with one kick in the stomach after the other?
Well, just slightly to go back a little bit to your point, of course, a lot of special jurisdictions won't have these kind of challenges, but these kind of challenges are the ones that you have to go through if you want true freedom, to not answer to anybody. So to us, it's worth it. Um, so to your other question, I mean, I think the thing that's got us through the last 60 years is relentless determination, grit, a lot of stubbornness, and I think I don't, it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable saying it sometimes because it sounds cheesy, but just pursuing your dream. You truly believe in something. And that for us has lasted through 3 generations now, which is, I think, testament to our family and the way we think about things and the way we see the world.
Yeah, I think our grandfather and father even they sort of entered into it with a blank slate. But for us, this is all we've ever known. We've grown up with this. It's like a mentality that's been drilled into us from the minute we were born.
Wow.
Do
That
you
was
think you could fight pirates if they came knocking at your door?
Of course.
We'd have to. I mean, we have certain plans and preparations in place for if that happens again, because it's happened so many times, obviously not for a long time, but that doesn't mean that these things don't happen. You know, mirrored in a large way in Europe, I mean, you have to prepare.
There are so many angles of lessons that I think you can teach to people who are trying to build their own special jurisdiction because, like you all said, you have it all, right? Usually, some of these projects try to create or try to focus on the digital space or make something in land or on the ocean, but you have all of these extraterritorialities at the same time, right? And you also have a government near you that you have to deal with, but at the same time, a bigger geopolitics in the larger area. It's really interesting. So, with that in mind, what would you say is the biggest lesson you have learned in this from the 60 years of Sealand history?
So there again, there's a lot. I think certainly in our case would be that resilience has truly beaten resource, and it's in resources, not resourcefulness. Because my family put absolutely everything and every penny they've had into Sealand, and we didn't have a lot. I mean, my grandfather started Sealand because the UK government had crushed his business, so absolutely everything we've done has just is poured our heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into it, and that's carried us for the last 60 years. You know, that is what has got Sealand to this point. So I think you have to be very clear-eyed in your determination of you're going to do this because there's going to be a lot of speed bumps. People are going to throw all sorts of things at you that you don't expect from all angles. And if you don't have that determination, then you're not going to make it.
Agree. Agree. And in terms of your biggest diplomatic victory, what is this thing that you were going to say and didn't?
James?
Yeah, I mean, following the coup and the counter coup, and we kept a prisoner because basically one of the guys that held my father hostage, he was tried in the Sealand court and basically tried for treason, and we held him prisoner for a period of time. And Germany appealed to the UK government and asked them to basically try and take some action, but the UK government said, "I'm sorry, they're outside of our control. We can't do anything." So Germany then sent a diplomat directly to the fortress to negotiate the release of the prisoner. And for us, that was one of our most defining moments as far as de facto recognition.
Was that the moment where you felt, or the moment that marked the Sealand's history and made you and people who were at that time working on it say, okay, Sealand has definitely made history. It definitely stands out as a special jurisdiction on its own feet.
I think my family are just too sheer bloody minded. They already assumed that was the case. It didn't really matter whether Germany had sent a diplomat or not. In time, I think we viewed it like that, but at the time, it was yeah, just part of it.
And
Okay.
you've had other smaller diplomatic victories too. Could you talk about those, like passport recognition in certain countries, engagement with different sovereigns and what have you? I obviously, details, if confidential, no need to disclose, but I mean you've had quite a few victories in the past 60 years.
Yeah, people have traveled on using Sealand passports to Holland, Belgium, and some other countries also, I think, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. There was an incident in I believe it was the early 70s when a UK warship was coming closer and closer to Sealand. My father fired warning shots over its bow to warn it off. The ship disappeared, and then when my father later returned to the UK, he was hauled in front of a judge and tried on firearms offences, and they found that the UK had no jurisdiction over Sealand, which of course is another diplomatic victory. Yeah, I mean, there's also the question of acquiescence, that the UK government know the sorts of things that we do that are at odds with UK law, and they've not taken action to suppress it or to change the situation. So that in itself is a kind of a diplomatic win, I would
Yeah.
think.
And why do you think they just let you be?
I think that they're waiting for us to get bored and abandon Sealand. I think that they came up with all sorts of plans to invade, to underhandedly try and lure my family off of Sealand and all sorts of things. There's the now released confidential papers that show all these plans that they had, but I think they weren't willing to risk the lives of the military personnel or my family. So in the end, they decided that the best course of action would probably be to try and wait this one out. But it's been a pretty long wait to this point, I would think.
And what I've seen also in working with both of you is that usually the third generation is the one that makes projects collapse. In this case, I've seen a revitalization of Sealand with you. It's like new blood comes, and I know you have very interesting plans for Sealand that very much parallel where the world is heading towards. But I don't know if maybe I'm not the right person to talk about it. Maybe other people in the audience have questions about where you see Sealand going. So I suggest we open everyone's microphones and let people who came to talk to you just talk to you directly and ask the questions that you have. Julian, can you please open microphone?
Yeah. I was about to tell you that in order to make it organize it, so the idea will be for the people to raise their hands. And as in order as I see the people raise their hands, I can start unmuting the microphones.
Perfect.
So let me know.
So I see David. David.
Yeah, and just an FYI, everyone, thank you, David, for raising your hand physically. There is actually a function where you can raise your hand using Zoom, so we could see that way. But if you
Unfortunately, I'm on my phone as opposed to my laptop, so I don't see that. But thank you. Now, just looking at the e-residence and with Estonia and Palau, any thoughts of expanding kind of your product offering? One area that I've seen that really neither Palau nor Estonia have gone after is driver's licenses and getting registered driver's licenses, which is especially difficult for people who move to different jurisdictions. And it is seen to they're continuing to have a driver's license is an indication of residence and may continue to attract tax residents. So having a driver's license from a place like Sealand would sever that tax residency side. I'm a tax lawyer, so it's...
Okay. I mean, my initial thoughts would be that I suppose having to test someone and have the ability to test them on Sealand.
Well, no, I think you would say if you are got a New York or West Australia or Ontario or whatever driver's license that's in good standing,
right.
Then you can have recognition in Sealand. I mean that's a mechanical thing. That no, I wasn't proposing that you set up a bunch of pylons on Sealand.
No, I didn't suppose you were, but it was just a thought. Yeah, I mean we offer two forms of ID. Both of them you have to pass through a rigorous, basically government gold standard vetting process to prove that you are who you say you are. But I mean we haven't actually looked into that, but it's an interesting idea.
Thank you.
So the next one that follows is Natalie, you were to say something?
I was gonna say
Okay.
I think you were going to say so.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so the next one that I have here is Dominic. So please go ahead.
Yes, so my question, what I'm interested in is like obviously I've heard quite a lot about the history of your relationship with the UK government. Where do you see your relationship with the UK government right now? Do you think it's on good terms, bad terms, and how do you see that developing in the future? Do you have any kind of thoughts on where you think that might be headed? Will relations get better or worse?
Just take that, Lim.
Yeah, I mean the relations with the UK government were obviously hostile in the early years, and kind of touching on what I said a minute ago that I think they've just pursued this line of thought that one day we will just go away. You know that the fortress will get old. It's going to be very expensive to completely redevelop. But no, I think I know that they blew up the other fortresses that were also in international waters, also almost immediately after my grandfather took Sealand. They even sailed very close to Sealand and shouted up to my father, "You're next." So their intentions were quite clear there. And in the future, if we did leave Sealand, which is of course, as I said, never going to happen, I'm sure they would be straight out there and they would blow it up. Our intention is to grow our community to a size where we can't be ignored by the UK and other governments and basically pursue formal diplomatic recognition from there.
Perfect, thank you. So the next one that I have here is Claudio.
Hi, good night. I am Claudio from Brazil. I'm curious I'm an economist, so I'm curious to understand how do you live in the Sealand? How do you How do you because Sealand is a platform. There is no land to grow the crops. So how do you feed yourselves? How is the trade you have with the continent? I mean, it's basically an economic question about the economic of Sealand.
Yeah, I mean, any sort of food or supplies, we import everything from the UK. Energy, we harvest the sun and the wind. We barely turn the generators on anymore. But economically, as far as just having to manage the place, maintain the place, it's all done through the website. I mean, our international community, the contributions they make keep the dream alive. They keep us going. As Liam said earlier, historically, this has always been financed by family business or just small projects, but actually, Sealand's been self-sustaining since 2010. So now we're 15 years.
Thank you so much. And the last one that I have right here is Mike.
Hi, good to meet you. Yes, I'm Mike, and I was interested. Are you planning or thinking of doing any kind of aquaculture, maybe like kelp farming and or even growing salmon, anything like that around there?
Yeah, I mean we've discussed that all those types of things before. I think that it can also be very useful. It serves a good purpose for helping to break things like the kelp farming to help break up the waves as they come in and around Sealand. Right now, the community on Sealand isn't really of the size where that's necessary. Just the resupplies every couple of weeks do us just fine. But I think as the community grows on Sealand itself, and as we redevelop the fortress, these are the types of things that we're really going to be taking a look at to really ensure that we do have that independence and that sustainability ourselves. But yeah, it's a great question.
Oh, or you have some expansion plans, anything like that?
Yeah. We have all sorts of plans, kind of short, medium, and long term to redevelop Sealand. This is part of what we're working on with the Startup Societies Foundation. So we're hoping to be able to share some of that soon with the community.
Oh, that's really good. How high are your waves there? You know what your maximum wave heights are?
Do you know the exact answer to that, James? I mean, it gets pretty wild in the North Sea
You get
sometimes.
sort of 5 meters. I mean, there's times when the tides are literally running up the side of the towers and smashing onto the bottom. Like things in the living room are shaking a little bit. But they were always my dad's favorite times because he said no one's going to invade when it's like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wondered, it gets pretty rough, I know, in the North Sea, although you're kind of protected. You're sort of near the Thames estuary, aren't you?
Yeah, not too far off.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I got a quick question, if that's okay, Julian.
Yeah, I was about to tell you that
I think
you
we
can
have
ask.
Mike, right?
What's that?
I think we have Mike.
No,
Oh,
Mike was the one that
Okay.
already
yeah.
made the question.
So your father dealt with challenges and had to find a way of your father and your grandfather had to find ways of being sustainable um, in an era that's mostly analog. But there are a lot of different technologies out there, a lot of different social and macroeconomic changes that are happening right now, where nation states are less solidified than they were in the previous century. Um, what can Sealand do with these macroeconomic changes or technological changes as leverage to increase the odds that they will not just be sovereign and have a declaration, but have more robust recognition from the international community?
Do you want to take that, James, or should I?
Go on, you go for it.
Yeah, I mean the most obvious is crypto technology. We've been watching it very closely since the sort of mid I should say since about 2014. We've been watching it with I guess, big hopes because one of the biggest challenges for us is being able to trade in your own currency or, the international banks and the banking system is a closed shop. I mean, you can't, without diplomatic recognition, there is no way of achieving that before the advent of cryptocurrency. And with that, also with those technologies such as DAOs, we can put all of our information, we can put our constitution on chain, people in a decentralized way throughout the world can really own a stake in Sealand. I think building up a big community who own that currency, who own that stake in Sealand, is a real way of getting that social proof that you're not going away, that you're too big to be ignored, and that at some point I for sure see a situation where Sealand will be diplomatically recognized. And by the way, I think other states that exist online the same way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And the next one that I have right here is Carly.
Hello. So my question is, I guess it's kind of related to the currency issue. How does the UK treat you as individuals? Like, do you have access to the healthcare system or the education system? Like, do you have to show a passport to arrive on shore? Like, do they treat you as, do you technically like share citizenship with Sealand and the UK? So I just have questions about that, those citizenship questions.
Yeah, I mean, we're dual nationals, so we also have businesses in the UK that we operate. We're UK taxpayers as well. So, but I mean, historically, they used to force my father to show his passport willingly, obviously, every time he came ashore. These days, I think they just try and ignore us as much as possible. So it's by doing that, it was almost an act of accepting that we were traveling offshore. And then also we've had letters in the past that my father's had letters to say if he's staying on the fortress, he didn't have to pay UK tax at the time, like national insurance and things. What else, Liam? Can you think of anything?
Yeah, I mean they were more or less the things I was going to say, and James kind of alluded to it. I think that they felt like the more they harassed us, the more they were giving us some small recognition. So I think they pretty much dropped those kinds of things. But we get the odd border force boat kind of creep closer and closer to us, keeping an eye on what we're doing, and I'm sure that we're being watched fairly closely. Although, we haven't done anything in recent years to really antagonize the UK government, so we've not given them much reason to, be aggressive.
Thank you so much. So the next one is going to be Natalie.
So, besides your history, what else you think makes you stand out from other special jurisdictions? Because there was a wave of, let's call them micronations. I don't think you fit in the micronation category. I think you're way more than that. But some people might land there. What do you think makes you not really fit that box, as I also don't think you do?
I mean, we've had that sort of physical presence that a lot of micronations haven't had. We've it's the we've survived a lot of challenges over the years, but there's been the community. I mean, it started small. It started just our family, but it's grown and grown and grown. And I think that has helped with the momentum. And we've talked about it previously, but for many years we didn't really engage with the community. We were more worried about just the survival of getting from week to week, of making sure everyone was fed on the fortress, that it rained enough, there was enough water. Otherwise, we needed to import water. But now we're obviously moving into the next stage, and we want to embrace that, and build out on the fortress.
Yeah, I think to add to that as well, I think that we're the only one of these type of projects, if you want to call it that, that has a true sovereignty claim. That would be extremely hard to replicate now. A lot of these upstart micronations, if you like, are well within the borders of a different sovereign. So um, we also have fulfilled the Montevideo Convention for decades and decades. So that alone speaks volumes about the claim that we have, and that to replicate that, I think since Sealand, since we did what we did, a lot of those kind of loopholes, if you will, have been closed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the next one that I have right here is Tom Bell.
Hello, and thanks for your wonderful story. I really only get one question. All right. I'll start with this one. You gentlemen have said very sensible things about getting sovereign recognition from other states. I think that's necessary, proper, difficult, but you're just the men to do it. And I've also heard you talk about kind of going down to the very local level, or to the man in the street with sponsoring sports teams, for example. That's kind of the thing everybody recognizes as, oh yeah, governments do that. I'm going to ask whether you've looked at the middle, because you are members of the royalty. And royal families are kind of parallel, even today, in the modern world, kind of parallel to traditional formal state structures. And, for all I know, you've actually tried this. If so, I'd like to hear the story. You pick up the phone. Hey, Prince Charles, I guess now he's not just a prince. He might not be so receptive, but there's a lot of royalty all over the world. And you have something nobody else has, and that is a great story, a great story. And royals are people too. So I'm just wondering if you've tried to look them in the eye and say, yes, we're like you. In fact, we're more like your ancestors because we actually fought to get this kingdom. But regardless, have you looked at that kind of middle ground between formal recognition by other states, tough, desirable, good luck, and kind of just getting the man in the street to think, oh yeah, Sealand, they got a flag, they got a soccer team. I guess they are a football team, as you'd say. I guess they are a sovereign. Have you looked at that middle ground of reaching out to other members of the royalty?
I mean, we actually never have. It's a really great suggestion, to be fair, because it's a completely different angle and way of looking at things. I think one big reason, probably no, is that the royal titles are there as function rather than anything else. We don't do all the dressing up that you see on a lot of these kind of upstart nations online. It's more just so that we can create the laws and run the country. But that's a great thought to mull over. And have you got any ideas on who should pick on first?
You might try, let me think here. Brunei. Brunei's emir. Ooh, also, yes, the emirs in Dubai. Both Islamic states, but don't let that get in your way. They're relatively small countries. And of course, Dubai's done all this experimentation with special zones. Maybe they'd be sympathetic. Unfortunately, I don't know, apart from you two, many members of the royalty. But I just know there's a lot out there. And I appreciate that, you don't wear crowns and ermine robes and all. And that probably wouldn't play well today. But I will say, if you look at how respected royals do it today, sometimes they put on all the fancy garb, but there's other ways that they make themselves look not silly and serious. And I bet you'd look really good in, in a robe, a modernized robe. Think about it. I'm not a costume director, but there must be a way to kind of make people think, yeah, he's a king when they look at you. And it's not unimportant.
Yeah, that's very true. I'll suggest it to my dad. He'd probably be a lot more in.
Okay.
And Tom, it sounds like you had a follow-up question in the hopper, so feel free to shoot away if you do.
Okay, I don't want to keep, who's it, Christopher? Thanks, Christopher. I'll be quick. Like I say, the thing you have is a wonderful story. It's just great. It's entertaining, it's engaging. I think it'll make people very sympathetic to you. And in the line of stories, I listen to a lot of history, and I'm searching myself. I'm not a professional historian, but I'm wondering, are there stories from history that you maybe have talked about around the dinner table and said, yes, we're like Richard the Lionhearted, or some other historical anecdote that would give you kind of a way to get your message across quickly? You could say, we're like, Richard Lionheart or Henry II or something, and people will immediately kind of get, yes, they're doing what people who create states do, and I understand that story, and I admire the heroes in that story, and these guys are like that. So I'm wondering if you have stories like that.
Do you know what? The one that always comes back to me is a lot closer to home for you. Sealand reminds me of the American story. My grandfather, his freedom's been crushed by the British. moving offshore. The British continue to try and crush your freedoms. You rebel against them. You're then out on the frontier on your own. The mentality, the things that are involved are in a way quite similar to Sealand. The more you think about the birth of America, the more parodies there are. Obviously, at a much bigger scale, but it's a super interesting rabbit hole to get yourself down.
Thank you both.
Cheers, Tom.
Thank you so much. So the next one that I have right here is Christopher.
Can hear me. I'm curious what might be on your list of things in your minds that you would maybe like to do on Sealand, or that you think you would be able to do on Sealand, or certain industries you could get into, but nevertheless you think would get you too much negative attention, whether it's from governments directly or from particular industries disrupting them. I think of, anything financial maybe 15 years ago might have been on that list, but now with crypto, maybe more opportunities. What does that list kind of look like for you guys in your minds?
James?
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, we're looking, like we say, to build out the physical infrastructure and make it a place that we can build a physical community there. As far as business, we've talked about biotech, about financial, all sorts of different industries. But to start with, we need to have somewhere that people can come to, and we would love to start building the community now, but physically the place isn't up to it. So we're very restrained in that respect.
Yeah, the blue economy is obviously a pretty obvious one. A pub is pretty high on my list, I'll be honest. As something that we want to have out there, and has been high on every Sealanders list for a while now. But as James said, we've got a lot of work to do to redevelop Sealand. But once we do, we'll create a space where we can safely and efficiently get large numbers of people to and from Sealand, and we'll be able to host, conferences, office space, residencies. The list is pretty extensive, but probably all the things you would imagine. It would be a super interesting space and would attract very interesting people. So
Thank you guys very much.
thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have right here Dominic again. So go ahead.
Yeah, so on that topic of like royal families in different places, I was just wondering how familiar are you with the story and history of the Principality of Monaco? Because it came to my mind immediately that I could see some parallels between you and like them in their much earlier days.
I would probably have to brush up on my European royalty history if I'm truly honest with you, but maybe I'll do that and then I'll follow Tom's advice and reach out to them.
Thank you so much. So let me check over here. So I think that that's going to be all the questions that we have at this moment. Oh, no. We have two more. So the first one that I have right here is Max.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, thanks. Thanks for this presentation, and thanks to you both for giving this really interesting introduction to this really quite incredible project you've set out for yourselves. I'm zooming in from the United States, and I was just kind of curious. I think one of the things that strikes me is the way you narrate the history of the project. And so there's sort of three generations, as you mentioned, and the economic and political context in which the project first gets rooted and then evolves into the present day with current plans that connect with a bunch of other somewhat analogous but also quite different type of special jurisdiction type projects tied to things like crypto or other forms of radical sovereignty projects, Prospera being one perhaps, and there are others. I'm sure many people here know more than I do about them. So I'm kind of curious how you understand the sort of fidelity to the original idea of your grandfather establishing Sealand, and then how it's evolved in connection with these new types of political economic plans that allow for it to sustain itself or imagine even bigger future?
Yeah, I mean, my grandfather was a true believer in freedom, making your own way in life. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do these types of things. So I'm sure that if he was alive today, he would be extremely enthusiastic by crypto technology, and the thought that you can circumvent the old system and the old rules, and you can go out there to your community and you can just build it for yourself. I mean, that's completely flipped the rules of the game on its head and massively in our favor. So the things that he believed in are the things that my father believes in and that James and I believe in. So I think that same message has gone down through the generations. And fortunately for us, the technology is now there that we can go out and do this. We need to take it to our community, get them excited by it, and we need to get it going.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. The next one that I have right here is Steve.
There, can you hear me?
Yep.
And thanks for the talk, James and Liam. If y'all could go back 20, 30 years ago and talk to a younger version of yourselves, what would you tell yourselves?
Sir, these are very young gentlemen. I don't know what you're insinuating.
Sealand's been quite hard on us over the years.
So, or to put it another way, what are the biggest lessons you've learned? Or what would you like to tell your own children? What are the biggest lessons you'd like to tell your own children?
I mean, I was like, I take my children out there quite a lot. Liam's are still very young. I was out there with my boys a few weeks ago, and it's just that it's the perseverance of it and the fact that this is there because of all the years that have built up before them. They haven't just stepped onto this place that's been funded by some large corporation. It's our family's blood, sweat, and tears have pulled us to this point. And they need to keep pushing forwards and keep trying to break new barriers and new boundaries with it.
Yeah, and I would add to that I would show them the things that I believe Sealand has helped to inspire, the kind of projects and the things that are being talked about, in fairly mainstream conversations these days, about trying to start these kind of countries online, network states, those kind of things, seasteading, all of these things are in some way or not rooted in Sealand. I mean, even the Haven Co. Project in the early 2000s, there's a lot of crypto history rooted in that because some of the guys that were involved in that went on to do amazing things with crypto. It's all part of that same kind of way of thinking and always pushing back against ever encroaching governments. And always, I would want them to always question everything, especially when it comes from a government. So I think that that's just super important.
Yeah, definitely. And something else we should have done 20 years ago is engage with our community more. I think we've been so caught up in the day-to-day operations that we should have actually been focusing on that a little bit more.
Yeah, and as part of that is I think that the Sealand narrative has been controlled by random memes and YouTube videos and Reddit and things like that for the last 20 years. And so something I've definitely learned is that if you don't take control of the narrative and tell people what you stand for and why you're here, people will tell that story for you, for good or for bad.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. So the next one that I have right here is Mitchell.
Hey, I'm wondering if you've been watching the political situation in the UK, and obviously the two domination of the two parties, Labour and Conservative, is coming to an end, and that does that bring you any hope that a a government outside of the established system, well, that would be the Reform Party, Do you think they would be more open to recognizing Sealand?
I'm not sure that the political situation in the UK would necessarily, that the changing situation in the UK would necessarily mean that for us. Um, what I what I do see from that is that the message that we always push for, which is don't let the government step on your freedoms, don't let them creep further and further into, your rights, because that's essentially what you're seeing. There's the government, the two main parties in the UK don't represent the people anymore, and it's taken the UK a long time to get to this point where they've just had enough, and that's going to mean the total destruction, most likely, of the two major parties. And this is a bigger, slower moving version of what my grandfather did with Sealand. My grandfather was just a lot more proactive, I suppose, and went out and founded Sealand, whereas this is a national movement. But the you can draw a very similar conclusion just looking at what's going on in the UK. And that's kind of what you always see, I guess. You see the government ever try and creep towards more control, and then eventually the people push back. Well, my grandfather just did it unilaterally.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think definitely um yeah, you're right. It's definitely important to continue on and not um I'll just say continue on regardless of what other people might think. Um but yeah, I'm just hoping that we can I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Right.
No problem. And one thing to note, and especially from a U.S. centered news week last week, um, even leading up to that, people thought that the only alternative to creating, better social systems was by voicing your concerns and going through the existing systems. But people are progressively finding that there needs to be an alternative, to peacefully build new alternatives and test them out versus arguing over the same hill over and over again, who gets on top of that hill. And that's not to say that we shouldn't work with existing institutions and what have you. But if the alternative is something much worse, and there's less and less willingness from people to listen, and to debate ideas, and perhaps more and more people are going to be interested in the idea, okay, let's let people try out these different policies and potentially even be more open to the idea of additional sovereigns to do that in a really robust way. So potentially in the grand scheme of things, some of the chaos that has been happening recently in the UK and US and all across the West, possibly it'll lead to a greater sort of willingness to allow that, I would say.
I would certainly hope so.
Yeah, that's sorry. That is the point I wanted to make. That I'm hoping the political upheaval in established traditional nation states will create a paradigm shift towards more self-governance.
Yeah, I would certainly hope so. I mean, we all have to get back to a position where we're willing to take risks and try new things. That's how great things happen. So if we continue on as we are, then we're going to stagnate into irrelevance.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to wrap up a little bit. We already got some messages from people thanking y'all for your time, Liam and James. But I do want to give a final opportunity for people to have final questions and maybe just some remaining thoughts from Liam and James before we sign off. No one has any pressing questions for the OGs in the Startup Society space? Okay. Well, excellent. Well, in that case, let's have we got one more question.
All right. So I've looked at a variety of maritime industries that are already profitable and many which seem like they're going to be profitable very soon. And I was wondering what your personal experience was with I guess, the psychological challenge of being isolated at the sea for so long. Do you have any insights from that, or maybe you felt like you weren't really that isolated while out on the Sealand platform?
Yeah, I mean, historically, it has been very isolating out there, but I think it's just been a way of life. I don't think it's really something we've even thought too much about. Now it's very different. Now it's Starlink, and it's just not the same as it was before. Before, it was very much you would just keep looking out and seeing if a boat came every day to drop supplies off, and then if it didn't come, you'd go back. But we're very connected now. It's a complete different experience.
Excellent. Any remaining thoughts, Liam and James, closing ideas for everyone that are looking to get into this space, willing to try their own project and what have you?
Oh, Natalie, I think's got her hand up.
Okay.
No, someone was going to say something, but I didn't see who. Was it you, James? No? Okay. Well, we live in a world of nation states right now, but it is clear that historically the size of the territory of government has been shrinking. The territories of the status quo type of governance of that era, right? That it varies every 200 years or so. So we come from a world where there were big empires, before that, huge civilizations. And within those, we also had smaller governments. So the world has been historically been hierarchical, even though it has these big hierarchies like empires and nation states. But right now we live in a very interesting world where the territory of these governments is becoming smaller and smaller. We have places like Dubai, Singapore, that are huge players in the economic networks. And that economic position that they have is in many ways becoming more relevant a couple of decades into the future than the political power held by big nation states today, I think at least. So I think that what you are doing and what you can the lessons, the message that you can give to these types of traditional types of governance can also be, well, I think you have good lessons for them also as a small type of government that is emerging and that is part of the wave of what I see will be future types of government, right? Like the future status quo. So what would you say is the biggest lesson that you can teach the big tigers that we have today for how to create types of governments or governance that parallel how societies are evolving?
Yeah, I think that the biggest message for that would be that you have to give the builders space to build. You have to give them space to build the types of technology, the types of biotech, and all of these things that we're going to need into the future. Renewable energy. All of these things are just so heavily regulated in the developed world. And that's why you see these places spring up that deregulate and amazing things happen pretty much, overnight in terms of state longevity of states. So I think that's a big part of the message of Sealand is that's what we want to do. That's what we're building towards, and that's the future that we see.
I love it. I don't think you could close with a better phrase than that. So thank you so much, Liam and James, for joining us in our first Startup Societies Cafe. And to everyone else who attended, thank you so much. Any final words, Joe?
No, I think I'm good. Everyone, thank you so much for coming, and we'll make this a regular thing. Really enjoyed it.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Guys, thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting us.
Sleep well, Liam and James. Thank you for
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.